Winter in Vale, Book 2, Good Witch, Bad Witch. Excerpt from Chapter 4. The house's front door opened a minute after Violet knocked. Yes? Hi, Miss Wyndham. Violet smiled at the 50-ish woman with graying flyaway hair. The woman looked at her slightly askance. Hello, can I help you? Violet's smile faltered. Miss Wyndham, it's me, Violet. I came over a couple times this week to see Candy. The woman's brow creased. What did you say your name was? Violet. Violent? No, Violet. Violet couldn't decide whether to be amused or exasperated. The woman gulped. Candace is up in her room, she said, standing back and giving Violet plenty of room to maneuver around her. Violet thanked the woman politely, but she felt her eyes on her all the way up the stairs. I don't think your mom likes me, she said after Candy welcomed her into her room. The witch was wearing an indigo robe, a golden crescent moon necklace, and a gold and orange headband. What? Of course she does, Candy said as she took Violet's coat. Wow, you look so pretty. Here, have a seat. I'm just printing out the invocations. No, my mom's really chill. That's why I'm living with her and not my father. Violet sat on the bed and took off her hat as Candy returned to the computer. You don't speak to him at all? Candy sighed. I try, but he keeps trying to tell me that Wicca doesn't look good on a resume. Violet made a wry face. I'm sure the cats and dogs you take care of have strong objections to your religious background. Candy gave a half-hearted chuckle. Violet let her eyes drift across the room. Next to Candy's desk was her altar, covered with herbs, pentacles, crystals, and candles of different colors. Half her bookcase was filled with literature about pagan history and traditions, the other half with fantasy novels by J.R.R. Tolkien, Tamora Pierce, Lloyd Alexander, and others. Violet's gaze slid to the open door, where Candy had seen the intruder's shadow a week ago. She reflected on the 3 people they were luring into a trap tonight. Which one of them had crept into the house, somehow without leaving any signs of forced entry, and gotten all the way to Candy's bedroom doorway? Who was trying so hard to frighten her into ceasing her attempts to win representation for Vale's Wiccan community? Beside the door, at the edge of the dresser, an unusual item caught Violet's eye. It was a circular piece of cardboard with a smaller circle mounted onto its center. Both circles had paper pasted on one side, and the paper displayed colorful illustrations. Violet stood and pointed. May I? Yeah, go ahead. Candy was still focused on the documents she was printing. That's my little wheel of the year. Violet picked up the wheel and examined it. On the center circle there was a purple pentacle, with one point shaded deeper than the rest. The outer circle was divided into 8 segments, each with sketches of outdoor scenes from throughout the year. Snow falling, flowers blossoming, a rainbow, leaves turning, and more. The smaller circle rotated so the pentacle pointed to each one of the scenes. Do these represent the 8 sabbats? Violet asked as she sat back down. That's right. A friend made that for me. Violet turned the pentacle to point at a black cat. Is it true that Wiccans think of Samhain as the start of winter? Well, this one does. But isn't December 21st supposed to be when winter starts? You mean the solstice? Right. Candy threw an amused glance her way. The midwinter solstice, when snow's already been on the ground for weeks? Violet smiled back. I see your point. Of course, personally, I prefer Vale's local tradition, where winter officially starts whenever the first snow falls. She trailed off, her eyes wide with concern. It took a moment before Violet realized what Candy was staring at. All this week, Violet had been wearing the toque whenever she visited, slipping it on every time she left the Grogan house. This was the first time Candy had seen the gash on her forehead. Violet knew that although the wound had started to heal, it still looked ghastly. Oh my God! Candy sat next to Violet on the bed. What happened? Violet looked at the floor. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of. I don't know, she said quietly. It's one of the things I don't remember. Candy's hand appeared and squeezed her knee. That must be frustrating. Violet looked at her, saw not pity but empathy and comfort in Candy's eyes, her soft brown eyes. She whispered, It's more than that. I don't remember anything about my life, anything I've done. I could be a horrible person and not remember it. Candy's hand rose to Violet's shoulder. It was warm and soft. Violet went on, wishing she wouldn't. I just think you should know. The person you've gotten to know, the person sitting here, might not be the real me. To her surprise, Candy smiled. Let me tell you something, she said. You know the Wizard of Oz? Once again, Violet experienced the strange paradox of remembering a movie while being unable to remember having seen the movie. Yes. What's the first thing Glinda says to Dorothy when they meet? Of course, Violet knew the answer. Are you a good witch or a bad witch? Mm-hmm, said Candy. I love that story, but it really frustrates me when I tell people I'm a witch, and that's the first question they ask, jokingly or otherwise. In fact, I'm not sure which is worse, the people who say witches don't exist, or the ones who are so afraid of us, afraid of our powers, that they have to categorize us to decide whether they can accept us or not. We are just as human as the rest of you. That makes us good and evil mixed together, not one or the other. And just like you, we have the right to live and exist, with or without acceptance. She shook her head, her jaw tightening. I had a teacher once who tried to get my classmates to stop using swear words. He told us if we were going to say the F word, to replace it with fumble, to replace shit with shin guards, and bitch with... Violet closed her eyes and groaned. He gave me detention when I told him he was reinforcing a negative stereotype. But my point is, she moved her hand around to Violet's back, we have to work harder to remember that we aren't what people fear we are. We aren't someone to be judged on sight. Everyone is entitled to the benefit of the doubt, including you. Her hand rose again. Violet felt her fingertips on the back of her head, gently pulling her forward. Candy leaned in, and Violet felt the brush of her lips on the wound, felt her hot breath on her forehead. With a sudden intake of breath, Violet reached up, grasped Candy's cheek, and kissed her full on the mouth. Candy kissed her back, both her hands reaching around to pull Violet closer. It was fortunate the Sabbat was nearly an hour away.